Well, some new information now about the Benghazi terror attacks that killed 4 Americans. In a Fox News exclusive, newly declassified documents are revealing more about what U.S. intelligence agencies knew in the months leading up to the 2012 attack. Our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Harris, is live in Washington with more. Catherine?
Well, Jenna, this Defense Intelligence Agency report dated October 5th, 2012, and copied to the State Department, CIA, and senior military leadership, leaves no doubt that U.S. intelligence agencies were aware that lethal weapons were being shipped to Syria via the port of Benghazi. It reads in part, quote, weapons from the former Libya military stockpiles were shipped from the port of Benghazi, Libya, to the port of Benghazi and the port of Borj Islam, Syria. The weapons shipped during late August 2012 were sniper rifles, RPGs, and 125mm and 155mm howitzers missiles. But in a recent interview with Fox's Brett Baer, the former acting CIA director skirted the weapons topic and what the U.S. knew about it.
Were CIA officers tracking the movement of weapons from Libya to Syria?
Can't talk about that.
Can't talk about it?
Can't talk about it.
So are you saying categorically that the U.S. government and the CIA played no role whatsoever in the movement of weapons from Libya to Syria?
Yes, we played no role. Now, whether we were watching other people do it, I can't talk about it.
This Defense Intelligence Agency document may also be problematic for Mrs. Clinton, who skirted the weapons issue during her only congressional testimony on Benghazi in January 2013. Separately, another Defense Intelligence Agency memo indicates that just 24 hours after the 2012 attack, it had been tied to 9/11 and was retaliation for a June 2012 drone strike that killed an al-Qaeda strategist and not linked to an anti-Islam video. Quote, the intention was to attack the consulate and to kill as many Americans as possible to seek revenge for the U.S. killing of Abu Yahya al-Libi in Pakistan and in memorial of the 11 September 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center buildings. Judicial Watch obtained the new records by suing in federal court.
The Obama administration says it was a coincidence that it occurred on 9/11. In fact, their intelligence said it wasn't a coincidence, and in fact, specifically, the attack occurred because it was 9/11.
And another DIA memo from 2012 predicted the rise of ISIS and the establishment of a caliphate if the terror group's momentum was not reversed in Iraq and Syria. And this assessment came 17 months before the president called them the JV team. Jenna.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, the Iraq War, suddenly a hot-button issue for potential GOP presidential candidates, as Jeb Bush and now Marco Rubio are each grilled about whether or not they would have invaded Iraq. So, is Iraq the new gotcha question for the media? Let's talk about it with Alan Colmes, the host of the Alan Colmes Show, nationally syndicated by Fox News Radio. Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
Answer the question, Alan. Is it the new gotcha question?
I don't know. Is it or is it not? Maybe if we went back then, if now, but afterwards, I don't. It should be a gotcha question because but the real question should be, as Maureen Dowd wrote about in her Sunday column, is knowing what you knew then, should you have invaded Iraq? And the answer should be no. That should be the question. We knew then this was a bad move, and we weren't going to fix it.
That's what Jeb Bush says tripped him up. The difference between knowing what we know now or knowing what we knew then.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know with Maureen Dowd if she'd had some of her edibles with that column that she wrote, but nice? At the same time, the real question is, and this perhaps Hillary will be asked this, would you have abandoned Iraq when Obama abandoned Iraq, knowing what we know now? Would you have abandoned Benghazi, knowing what we know now when you abandoned? Would you have abandoned Syria? So these are very interesting points. And in that point to Hillary, somebody who was actually involved in the decision making, here you're asking men who had nothing to do with the dynamic that they're being asked about. And I think that it's important, though, also for the Republicans. You're seeing how these men respond under pressure. I think Rubio did very well. I think the headlines, when you watch the video versus the headlines, Alan, this is where the legacy media moves. Completely different dynamic than what actually occurred.
It's a very simple question. Would you have done it then? Do you think Jeb, so easy to get them confused and say they have the same
that's the point.
They have the same foreign policy advisors too. Jeb is not only unable to answer the question and claims he got it wrong when Megyn Kelly asked him, answered again, did the rope-a-dope when Sean Hannity asked him, and then finally after the 5th time, which is the charm, answer the question.
Well, it's a simple question, and it is a simple question. It is, and I think this for Jeb Bush is bad news because suddenly he doesn't seem so inevitable. Rubio, on the other hand, whom I've been very critical of, suddenly is sounding very, very good. And this is what's important because, you know, the media will do this to Republicans for the next 9 years. And I think that if you can't handle the American media, you can't handle the world.
You can't blame the media. It's always the media's fault when Republicans can't answer a question. Somehow it's the media's fault. You have to know how to deal with the media. Jeb Bush should know better. Marco Rubio could have done better yesterday.
If you're actually watching the interviews, you get a completely different impression, at least with Rubio, than what the headlines are saying. And it also tells you that the legacy media is more concerned about Marco Rubio than I think anyone else at this point.
But every president has issues that they certainly wish they would have handled differently.
Right.
And the point that Jeb Bush seemed to be making is that these are hypothetical questions, and let's talk about current events and current issues.
He couldn't answer a hypothetical question. At least Hillary Clinton, who voted for that war in Iraq, and that helped her lose in 2008, has admitted she was wrong to have cast that vote. You're allowed to be wrong, and it's good when you say, I was wrong, I made a mistake. That's a decent thing to do.
Look, that's going to have to be her campaign theme, because with all the questions she's going to have to be asked, involvement with Syria, Benghazi, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Hillary Clinton's going to have a lot of explaining to do.
She was not the commander-in-chief, and by the way,
she was the Secretary of State. This was her job.
She didn't set policy. We get out of Iraq, and this drives me nuts, on George Bush's timeline, not on Obama's timeline.
No, actually, it was his inability and her inability.
It was George W. Bush that set the timeline for us to get out of Iraq.
It was their inability to get a status of forces agreement, which talks about a failure of leadership.
We could not get it.
Now, here's my prediction, though, with legacy media. Will this conversation, will these be the questions for Hillary Clinton? Because at some point she's going to have to answer some questions.
Well, I was going to say, or will Hillary Clinton answer questions, which she has not.
She'll have to. She'll be in debate. She's going to have to answer questions.
And she will be in the general, and then it will be too late. She will not be able to hide.
Tammy Bruce, Alan Combs, thank you both. Jenna.
Well, big news story today. Police claiming a deadly biker battle at a shopping center in Texas could and should have been prevented. Why they're blaming a restaurant for letting the massive shootout go too far. Is there a case there? Our legal panel next.
Hi, I'm William Devane. And look at this. $18 trillion